But our topic today, Jeff, is somebody who you hold in high regard, arguably one of the most charismatic, one of the most quote unquote over. And you and I have a friend in the business who says that people throw that word around too often, that over doesn't mean what people think it does. They think when they come out and there's a big reaction, oh, I got a pop, I must be over.
Mm.
And he sort of makes the analogy, when you're really over, it's hard to just live normal life. You can't just run down to the Walmart, take the wife and kids down the Outback and not do a meet and greet on the way. That's when you're over. The Rocks, the Hulk Hogan's, the Stone Colds, et cetera, et cetera. I think you could argue that our guy today, I mean, Jeff Hardy probably has to do a meet and greet on his way back from the mailbox. Like, that dude is, of the modern era, one of the most over acts of this generation. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, without question. And we're going. So it's funny that you led with over. So let me ask you something. Or early, Conrad, it might have been before I even broke in. I'm trying to think. But how would you define over? And I know you just said, meet and greet, and that, can't leave the house without a meet and greet. But like,
here's my example, and I use this all the time in my real life, because as you know, I've had the opportunity to, I've had the privilege to work with a who's who of talent over the years through our StarCast conventions. So you get not only independent stars, but the current television stars, the stars of yesteryear, Hall of Famers, legends, world champions, international acts, mainstream celebrities, etc., etc. But every now and again, you run across somebody who, they think really highly of themselves. You might say they're arrogant, if you will. And my dad might say, boy, he's full of himself.
Yeah, I was going to use that one.
Say, he's getting too big for his britches. All these different Southern expressions.
Yeah.
But I often say, if I walked with them into Walmart, we could buy groceries for the month and run through the checkout and load them up and be unbothered.
Yeah.
But if you're just because I've ran across this in my real life, where you're just out somewhere and people are like, oh, and I happen to have been with Ric Flair when that's happened. I don't know, 1,000 times. Like, Ric Flair just walking through an airport becomes a meet and greet. Like, it's challenging to move. That to me is over. When you don't have to, I don't have to wear my own merch. I don't have to have theme music. I don't have to have pyro. He doesn't have to be wearing the robe. He doesn't have to be strutting and putting people in the figure four or calling people fat boy or cutting his forehead. You don't have to do any of that. He just exists. And people are like, oh, are you? Oh my God, that's over to me. How would you define over?
I think context is king, not to go on Uncle Eric's, one of his, but generally speaking, and this was, my grandmother and my father's kind of viewpoint. And I guess there's a lot of metrics, a lot of barometers, but basically needle movers.
Yes.
Is something that you can say move the needle, because you can take 5 guys and put them in a lineup. Dutch used to always give that analogy. Put them in a lineup and see how many people off the street, not at a wrestling show,
Yes.
Can pick them out. Also, all right, who's moving the needle in merch? Who's moving the needle in quarter-hour ratings? Who's, all the normal metrics, but moving the needle, because early in my career, and I'm talking about the first year or maybe 2 years, I'll say in that second year, Conrad, I had, gotten away from the initial angle, and maybe when I started using Simply Irresistible. No, but when whenever I was in tag matches, when the ball kind of started rolling off of that initial angle, next match coming up, Simply Irresistible, I may get a good pop and go to the ring and have a good match. And then I'd, get in the car and hear my dad talk, or hear my dad in Dundee or Dutch or whatever it is, and he's just like, they're talking and like, man, we got to get some guys over. We got to get some guys over, you know. And I'm thinking, now, hey, I'm in the back seat over here, you know. But we would have had fun with it, my dad. But then when my dad gets serious, he's like, son, there's such a difference. You going out and getting a good pop, you ain't going to sell a damn ticket by yourself. We got to get you there. And that was like spot shows. And then, you know, I kind of finally kind of evolved into that where, okay, running spot shows, I got to have Jeff on it, that kind of thing. And I guess there's just different barometers, but like you said, nowadays, you hear that where all the guys over, and I'm thinking, now, what do they really mean that? And it's become such a common term that I think people say it not they're just out of naivete or ignorance. And I'm not saying that in a bad way. It's just like, no, they're not.
The definition of ignorance. They just don't know any better. I mean, I think, let me take a stab at what you were saying too, because I echo what you're saying in that I think a lot of times, and you and I have said this before, WWE brands themselves based on WWE. It's, hey, WWE's coming to town. Once upon a time, maybe that wasn't the way all promotions were done. You know, there was a singular act or a match. And the needle mover thing you're talking about is a certain amount of people are going to see a WWE show just because it's a WWE show. So that is your baseline hardcore. If WWE's in town, I'm going fan base. But when we add a name featuring so-and-so, and now we can see that there has been a jump in tickets. Like John Cena right now is enjoying a return for several weeks to WWE. I would venture to guess they will feel that needle move.
They've already seen it on live events.
In ticket sales, in live events, in merch. He is a value add. And so if the brand in and of itself is going to draw the same, whether you're on the show or not, are you really over? Versus if your name is added and now all of a sudden there are more tickets sold, now you're over. And how much you're over is TBD, right? But we saw when Cena came back before, we certainly saw a boost. Like I think there was one show, maybe it was a Boston live event or a Boston TV show, or it was Raw or SmackDown or whatever. They announced Cena and sold an additional like 5,000 tickets. That is over. Would you agree?
I was at WWE when he was added to a Raw anniversary or something in the radio or something like that. It was like he was added. Boom. I mean, there was just an article about on, you know, the SmackDown. You know, he's going to be at SmackDown every Friday night. You don't think that's a hell of a strategic move? You think he just happened to show up in India? You don't think that's strategic? Just along the lines. I got another one for you, Conrad, that's while we're in this. And folks, we are going to get to Jeff Hardy, but and I'll give you my testimony on my firsthand experience on a talent being over. But recently, Conrad, your friend and mine, Mr. Meltzer, put out a tweet. And it said something to the effect, Dennis Rodman had zero effect on ticket sales and ratings. And I kind of did my head scratcher. And you know as well as I do, kind of the deal, how it all went down. It was last minute. So he's probably accurate on the ticket sales because of how society buys tickets today. But in the ratings, the quarter hour he was in is the only one out of the 8 that was higher than the prior one. So I'd say he moved the needle. Now, was it drastic? I don't want to get into all that, but he did move the needle in a positive way, and it was percentage-wise quite a bit up, and which made me kind of dive into. I just wanted to get a couple of folks, and I said, hey, man, help me out here. And we went back and looked at that original tweet that went out, Conrad, and comparatively speaking, all the other tweets that were put out over that weekend. Conrad, nothing was even close to it. Now, is he going to sell a boatload of wrestling buys?
Well, by the way, it was announced the day before, Jeff.
That's what I'm saying. I'm not. Yeah, I mean, look, we could, and I'm not here to poke holes or positive, negative, all that. I just we're talking over. Yeah. I was surprised at how much traction on a Friday afternoon, late Friday afternoon, one tweet ended up being over 2 million impressions.
2.8 last I checked.
Wow. Folks, and relatively speaking, I don't think they break 100,000. Yeah, I mean, I don't think for the general. So it's way up there. But the quarter hour ratings, what I was like, damn, you know, and it opened with good old Mr. Schiavone in the ring and Dennis and all that. But it's the only quarter out of all 8 that had a nice little bump. Now look. Again, this can be taken to so many different ways. Does it translate to this? Does it translate to that? But we're kind of talking about what's over and what's not over. That's that he made a difference in the metrics of his person on his social media, which I believe translated into you know, the Saturday Night Collision bumping their quarter hour. Now to create revenue out of that the next night. Well, that's you know, then you get into progressions and all that kind of stuff. But we're talking about Cena. They purposely put him on advertised 6-8 Friday nights. That's kind of, hey, tune in on Friday nights. That's going to help us get ratings. But the ticket sales is black and white, and the India deal, my gosh, that gets into multiples of re-upping the contract. So good, healthy discussion, pal.
Jeff, as we're talking, I just quickly perused the Twitter feed.
Okay.
And the biggest announcement or the biggest post in the last handful of days was the Tony Khan tweet about Bryan Danielson and Zack Sabre Jr. at Wrestle Dream, which truly is a dream match. 507,000 impressions.
Okay.
The second biggest that I can see is a fabulous match I'm really excited about, which is happening next week from Arthur Ashe Stadium. Claudio versus Kingston, and that had 403,000 impressions. So those are your 2 sort of big tweets in the last few days. Meanwhile, a multiple of that for Rodman. So we can say, you know, we can be critical of that if we'd like, and certainly people have been. But you and I know what the investment was, and we know what the return is. So when you strip away what you like, which is very subjective, and we look at it objectively as a business, and now, you know, it's charts and graphs. It's not close. It was a fraction of the money and delivered 4 times the result or the impressions.